Now, a while ago, Opera released a gaming web browser for desktop, Opera GX. Now, I do actually like Opera. I don't use it because it's non-free software and owned by a kind of sketchy company, but purely as a web browser, I do think it's pretty neat. But I still really don't understand the need for a gaming web browser. So you can imagine, I understand the need for a mobile gaming web browser even less. Yes, indeed, Opera have recently released a gaming web browser for mobile. Now, don't worry, I haven't started shilling non-free software on this channel. I just wanted to talk about it because it's a strange, pointless, and, to be honest, kind of stupid curiosity. So we're going to be taking a look at it right now on the Linux Lounge. So indeed, as I said during the opening today, we're taking a look at Opera GX, a mobile gaming browser. Now, I did actually try to record this review once before, but it got interrupted halfway through. It's almost like the universe doesn't want me to look at this junk web browser. Now, if you actually like this web browser, as you can imagine, this review is not going to be particularly positive. But let's take a look at it anyway, because there are a few cool things here. So if we open this up, you can see almost immediately that this is definitely a gaming web browser. Now, I'm a little bit undecided about what I think of the gamer aesthetic. I think it's a little bit loud for me personally, so as you can imagine, I really don't like this homepage. I think it's actually hideous even by gaming standards. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are going to like it, but I really don't. But to each their own. So the first thing that you get when you open up this web browser is a way to search things up or enter an address. You get top sites and you get a lot of gaming related content. Now, the top sites, they all make sense. YouTube, Twitch, Reddit, all of those are pretty frequently used by gamers, so I imagine that these are a sponsored placement. These make sense. I don't see why there's a link to Amazon, but I suppose Opera have to make money somehow, even though they could go open source and probably survive just fine. Now, the next thing that you'll see is a lot of gamer stuff. Now, I think that all of this is junk and does not need to be in a web browser, but maybe to some gamers it would be useful. So the first thing that you'll get is a release calendar. This will tell you when games are being released. Now, a lot of these games I have never heard of, so I assume that at least some of these are probably sponsored placements. But if you're a gamer who wants to keep track of what's coming out, maybe this is useful for you, but I don't see why this is on the homepage of a web browser. Next up, you get some free games. Now, this is absolute junk. I don't see why there's this many advertisements on the homepage of a web browser. So all of these games are probably sponsored placements, and to be honest, I wouldn't imagine that any of them are any good. Maybe if you're big on free games and stuff, this will be something that you're interested in, but really I just think that this detracts greatly from the overall quality of the web browser, and it makes me feel like I'm using something loaded with adverts, which is essentially what I am doing here. Next, you've got some new, upcoming and interesting games. Now, I assume that once again, these are probably sponsored as well. Why are they here? The only one good thing that I can say about all this stuff is they do actually have a Linux category. So if you want to keep up with what new games are coming out for Linux or whatever, you can do that. Although there's not really anything here, which is a shame. So if we keep going, you've got some deal aggregators. Now, this is pretty sketchy. I have never heard of most of these sites, and the ones that I have heard of, for instance G2A, don't exactly have the best reputation. So like I say, what is this doing on the homepage of a web browser? Seriously guys, get rid of this sketchy stuff. It just makes the browser look bad. If we keep going, you can also see some game trailers. Now, this is being pulled from YouTube. This is kind of cool, but once again, why is it on the homepage of a browser? If I wanted to look at game trailers, I'd just go onto YouTube and search up game trailers. This doesn't need to be here. Next up, we have daily news, and this is all very gaming-centric stuff. Now, Opera do actually have a lot of news apps. There's even a dedicated Opera News app, but to be honest, I find it to be a little bit lowbrow for my taste, even the Opera News app. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are going to like that, but that's really not my sort of thing. And to be honest, I really like to know where my news is coming from. I like to know exactly kind of how everything is, what stances the sites that I read take, and all that sort of thing. And I find that using a news app like that makes that sort of thing more difficult, so I just want a RSS feed. And once again, this doesn't need to be in the browser. Opera already has a dedicated news app. If you want news from Opera, there's an app for that. It does not need to be in the web browser. But I suppose that's just me complaining, and that's pretty much the end of the start screen. You've also got a link to Opera GX's Discord, Twitter, Twitch, Reddit, whatever you want. There's also a forum. So if we scroll up, let's go ahead and search something. Now the default search engine is Google. That's kind of to be expected. So let's just punch in something random and see what we get. So as you can see, searches it with Google. Now it's worth pointing out that Opera is based on Chromium like most web browsers, so that means you'll get, decent performance, great compatibility, all that sort of thing. But the downside is it's based on Chromium, and a lot of people are not going to like that. Now, as you can see, the gamer aesthetic is very much still going even when you're browsing the web. You get some pretty cool features here too, but the UI is all a little bit strange. So at the top you have your URL bar, that's pretty normal. You also have a feature called the flow, which essentially you can connect Opera to any other Opera browser, including Opera on desktop as you would imagine, and you can send links, images, notes, whatever you want to your desktop. Now that's a little bit like Apple's handoff, I think, and to be honest it is a pretty useful feature, but I'm not sure that I would trust it necessarily. But if you do trust it, I've got to say it is definitely one of Opera's more useful features. I should also just mention that if you're a Linux user like me and this sounds appealing to you but you don't trust Opera, there is actually a program called KDE Connect which does a lot of the same things and more. So that's definitely something you can look into. Next up you have what's called a Hamburger Menu, and in here you've got all the usual stuff that you would expect. Back and forward arrows, refresh page, bookmark, share, new tab, finding page, site options, and you can view the desktop site. Now quite why the back and forward buttons aren't on the taskbar at the bottom, I don't know. It would make more sense if they were, but I guess they're not. Also confusingly, you've got another Hamburger Menu down here when you tap the Opera logo, and that gives you access to My Flow. I don't actually understand why there needed to be two buttons for that, but like I said, this is a very confusingly designed UI. There's also history, private mode, downloads, and settings. You've also got your tabs, as you would imagine, that pretty much works like you'd expect, and a dedicated button to make a new tab, which takes you right back to the junk start page. I don't really understand why that needed to be a dedicated button on the taskbar, but I guess it is. You also get some settings here where you can connect to a computer. You can also change the theme. There's a few themes here. To be honest, I don't like any of them, but I think out of all of them, the classic theme is the best. You can change it to a light or dark theme, or you can have it change with your device. You also get a built-in ad blocker, which is pretty handy. Cryptocurrency mining protection, pop-up blocking. You can enable or disable cookies. You can block cookie dialogues if you wish. You can clear browsing data. You can set web pages to automatically have a dark theme. Now that's a very, very handy feature, and I don't understand why more browsers don't have it. It does break a few sites from time to time, but I find that it is definitely well worth it. You can also go ahead and turn things on or off on the start page. Let's go ahead and turn these off and then see what happens. So let's go back to the start page, and sure enough all the bloat is gone, but that still doesn't really change the fact that the start page is pretty hideous. And if we keep going, that's pretty much about it. You can change your search engine. Now, frustratingly, you've got a list of search engines that are already pre-installed, but you can't actually add a new one. So if you want to use some search engine that isn't in this list, well, tough luck, you can't do it. I don't actually understand why that is, but it's incredibly annoying. And if you keep going, you can change the default downloads location, set this as the default browser. Quite why you would want to do that, I don't know. Recommend it to a friend so you can spam friends with this junk. You can rate the application, and you've got all sorts of about information. Now, I've got to say, all in all, this browser makes no sense. There's really no features here that would particularly make this worthwhile to anyone, not even gamers. Now, maybe if you're a die-hard Opera user, this would make sense, but to be honest, even then, the UI is not that great, and believe it or not, Opera actually has a standard Opera browser on mobile, which already has way more features, a way better UI, and is just all-round better than this, so it does not make sense to use this browser. Now, quite why this browser has so many fewer features than the main Opera browser on mobile, I don't know. And you know what the worst part about all this is? Opera GX is actually just a reskin of Opera Touch. As you can see, this is completely the same, more or less. Now, obviously, there's less gamer-centric stuff here, but if we go ahead and search something up, you can see that this is an identical web browser. browser, so what was the point? Why not just add all the gamer features to Opera Touch? It really is ridiculous. Opera have, I think, 3 different mobile web browsers. Why is that necessary? Just add everything to one and let the user customize what they want and don't want. So all in all, I really can't recommend this web browser. It's filled with junk. There's nothing that will really make it worthwhile for mobile gamers. It doesn't optimize performance or anything. And even if you're a die-hard Opera fan, you would still probably be better served by Opera Touch, or even better, just the standard mobile Opera browser. But to be honest, I can't recommend Opera at all because it's owned by a really sketchy company that have done all sorts of terrible things, from offering predatory loans to just all around being sketchy. And to be honest, there are just better mobile web browser offerings out there. And I don't even say that as someone who's a die-hard free software user. I say that as someone who just thinks that this is a junk web browser. So with that said, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed me rambling about this browser. I thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.